The diplomatic vessel Dawn's Promise glided through the docking corridor of Kepler Station. Captain Yuna sat in her command chair, watching the massive trade hub grow larger on the view screen. She had piloted through asteroid fields and navigated hostile territory, but nothing made her more nervous than this moment. Today, humanity would sit at the table with the Galactic Council for the first time. Ambassador Taeyang stood beside her, his hands clasped behind his back. He wore the formal blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. His face showed no emotion, but Yuna had worked with him long enough to see the tension in his shoulders. 5 years of applications, thousands of messages, and countless rejections had led to this moment. "Docking in 5 minutes, Ambassador," Yuna said. Taeyang nodded. "Thank you, Captain. Is Jisoo ready?" "Security Chief Jisoo has been ready for 3 hours," Yuna replied with a slight smile. "She's checked every weapon, every sensor, and probably memorized the station's layout twice." Inside the station, the main plaza bustled with activity. Beings from dozens of species moved through the wide corridors. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4 or 6. Some had scales, some had fur, and some had skin that shimmered like oil on water. Vendors sold food and trinkets from small shops. Children from various species played together near a fountain. Jisoo walked through the plaza with her security team. She was tall and lean with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her hand rested casually near her sidearm. The weapon was small, a sign of respect to the station's peace protocols, but Jisoo didn't trust peace protocols. She trusted her training and her instincts. "Sector 7 is clear," one of her team members reported through the comm. "Good," Jisoo replied. "Keep rotating patrols. I want eyes on every entrance to the conference hall." The conference hall itself was impressive. A massive circular room with seats arranged in tiers like an ancient amphitheater. The ceiling was transparent, showing the stars beyond. At the center was a platform where speakers would address the council. Ambassador Taeyang entered with his staff. He saw representatives from 6 alien species already seated. The Vryn, who looked like tall birds with 4 arms. The Korthan, stocky beings with gray skin and no visible eyes. The Pelix, whose bodies seemed to shift and flow like liquid. And others, each stranger than the last. A being that looked like a walking tree with crystalline bark approached Taeyang. This was Council Speaker Prax, leader of the Galactic Council. "Ambassador Taeyang." Prax's voice came through a translation device. "Welcome. We are pleased humanity has reached this milestone." Taeyang bowed slightly. "Speaker Prax, the honor is ours. Humanity is eager to join the galactic community." "Then let us begin," Prax said. The opening ceremony was formal and long. Each council member spoke about unity, cooperation, and the benefits of peaceful trade. Taeyang listened politely, though he had heard similar speeches 100 times before. What mattered was what came after, the real negotiations. In the civilian quarter of the station, families gathered for the celebration. Human colonists from nearby systems had traveled to Kepler Station for this historic day. Among them were 17 humans, including 5 children who ran and laughed near a viewing window. Nobody saw the Vexil infiltrators until it was too late. The explosions tore through the civilian quarter at exactly 14:47 station time. The first blast hit the viewing window, shattering it and sucking 3 people into space. The second hit a restaurant. The third hit a playground. Jisoo heard the alarms and was moving before her mind fully processed what happened. "All teams, civilian quarter now," she shouted into her comm. She sprinted through the corridors, her weapon drawn. Smoke filled the air. People screamed and ran in all directions. Jisoo pushed through the chaos, her team right behind her. She saw bodies on the ground. Some moved, some didn't. Her stomach twisted, but she forced herself to focus. "Medical teams to civilian quarter," she barked into her comm. "We need emergency response now." On the main view screen in the plaza, a message appeared. The symbol of the Vexil radicals filled the screen. Then a face appeared, a Vexil with dark scales and cold eyes. "People of the galaxy," the Vexil said. "We are the true path. We demand that humanity withdraw its council application immediately. We demand they surrender 3 border systems to Vexil control. You have 48 hours. If you refuse, more attacks will follow. This is not negotiation. This is inevitability." The message ended. The plaza fell silent. Captain Yuna had run to the civilian quarter the moment she heard. Now she stood among the wreckage, her hands clenched into fists. 17 humans were dead. She recognized some of them. A family from the Mars colonies. an engineer from her own ship, a mother and her 2 children. 43 aliens from various species had also died in the attack. The Vexil terrorists hadn't cared who they killed as long as the message was clear. The Galactic Council convened within the hour. Ambassador Taeyang sat in the human section, his face like stone. Around him, council members whispered to each other. Some seemed shocked, others appeared resigned. Council Speaker Prax stood at the center platform. "This is a tragedy," Prax said. "Our hearts go out to all who lost loved ones. However, we must now discuss how to respond. The true path has made demands. We should open channels of communication to determine what they truly want." Taeyang felt something cold settle in his chest. "I'm sorry, did you say open channels of communication?" Prax looked at him with what might have been sympathy. "Ambassador, this is standard procedure. We engage with the dissidents, we learn their grievances, we find acceptable compromises. This is how civilized species resolve conflicts. They murdered 17 of my people," Taeyang said, his voice quiet but hard as steel. 5 of them were children. "You want to negotiate with them?" A Korthan council member spoke up. "Ambassador, we understand your anger, but violence only breeds more violence. Through dialogue, we can end this peacefully." "They killed children," Taeyang repeated. "And more will die if we don't negotiate," Prax said. "Ambassador, please understand. Every species here has dealt with radical elements. We have learned that the path to peace is through compromise, not confrontation. Give them something, they stop attacking. This is how the galaxy works." Taeyang stood up. The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned to him. He looked at each council member in turn, then spoke words that would echo across the galaxy. "We don't negotiate with murderers. Find them, or we will." The chamber erupted. Council members shouted objections. Prax called for order. But Taeyang simply walked out, his back straight and his head high. Outside the chamber, Jisoo was waiting. "Ambassador?" "Contact Earth," Taeyang said. "Tell Fleet Admiral Minho we need authorization for full military response. And tell him to make it fast." Jisoo smiled grimly. "Already done, sir. The Admiral's response just came through." She handed him a datapad. Taeyang read the message. It was short, just 3 sentences. "No negotiations. No compromises. Hunt them down." For the first time that day, Ambassador Taeyang smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of someone who had just realized they didn't have to pretend anymore. The galaxy was about to learn something new about humans. Something important. Humans don't bargain with murderers. The next morning, Council Speaker Prax arrived at the human diplomatic quarters. He brought with him 3 other council members and what he called a reasonable proposal. Ambassador Taeyang made them wait in the lobby for 20 minutes before agreeing to see them. "Ambassador," Prax began, settling into a chair that was too small for his tree-like body. "We have worked through the night on a solution. The Council is prepared to offer the Vexil radicals 1 border system instead of 3. We will also provide them with trade agreements and a formal apology for past grievances. In exchange, they will cease all hostile activities." Taeyang sat behind his desk, his hands folded. "What about justice for the 17 humans they murdered?" A Pelix council member rippled uncomfortably. "Ambassador, we understand your need for closure. Perhaps a memorial fund? We could establish scholarships in their names." "What about the 43 aliens they killed?" Taeyang asked. "Do their families get scholarships too?" "We have protocols for compensation," Prax said. "Each family will receive standard death benefits. But Ambassador, we must think of the living. If we don't negotiate, more will die." Taeyang stood up. "Get out." Prax blinked in surprise. "I'm sorry?" "Get out of my office. Get out of human quarters. We're done talking." Taeyang's voice was calm but absolute. "You want to pay murderers to stop murdering. We want to make sure they never murder again. These are not compatible positions." The council members left, confused and angry. As they walked through the corridors, they muttered to each other about human stubbornness and primitive thinking. They had no idea what was coming. Captain Yuna stood on the bridge of Dawn's Promise, but she wasn't alone anymore. 6 military vessels had arrived from Earth during the night. Destroyers, frigates, and 1 heavy cruiser. The cruiser was called Indomitable, and its captain was Commander Jinwoo, a man with a reputation for getting things done. "Captain Yuna," Jinwoo's voice came through the comm. "Ready to do some hunting?" "More than ready, Commander," Yuna replied. "Security Chief Jisoo has been gathering intelligence. She has leads." Jisoo had indeed been busy. While the council argued about compensation packages, she had been doing what she did best. She interviewed witnesses, analyzed security footage, and tracked communication patterns. Her team worked through the night, drinking coffee and following digital trails. 36 hours after the attack, she walked into Ambassador Taeyang's office and dropped a datapad on his desk. "Found them," she said simply. The datapad showed a map. A red marker indicated an asteroid field in unclaimed space, just 3 hours from Kepler Station. The Vexel terrorists had hidden their base inside a hollowed-out asteroid, thinking they were safe. "How certain are you?" Taeyang asked. 100%, Jisoo replied. "We tracked their communication relay. We identified their supply ship. We even know how many of them are there. 27 terrorists, plus 2 human engineers they captured during the attack." Taeyang looked at the map for a long moment. Then he tapped his comm. "Commander Jinwoo, this is Ambassador Taeyang. You have a target?" The human fleet moved with precision that shocked the aliens watching on sensors. No debates, no diplomatic messages, no warnings. Just swift, coordinated action. The council tried to contact the human ships, tried to call for emergency sessions, tried to demand explanations. The humans ignored every message. Commander Jinwoo led the assault. His ship, Indomitable, moved into position along with 2 destroyers. They surrounded the asteroid, weapons ready. Then, and only then, did Jinwoo open a communication channel. "This is Commander Jinwoo of Earth Forces to the terrorist base inside asteroid K447. You have killed innocent civilians. You have murdered children. You are holding 2 human engineers hostage. Release the hostages now and surrender. You have 10 minutes. Inside the asteroid, the Vexel terrorists couldn't believe what they were hearing. One of them, the leader who had made the video message, started laughing. "They're bluffing," he said. "The council won't let them attack, just wait. They'll come begging to negotiate." 8 minutes later, the terrorist received a priority message from the Galactic Council. Council Speaker Prax himself appeared on their screens looking desperate. "Please wait," Prax said. "We can resolve this peacefully. Name your terms. We can meet your demands." The terrorist leader smiled. He had won, just like always. He opened a channel to the human ships. "We want Ambassador Taeyang to publicly apologize. We want the 3 border systems. We want—" His words were cut off. On every screen in the terrorist base, a new image appeared. It showed the 2 captured human engineers. They were tied to chairs in a small room. The engineers looked tired and scared, but alive. Then the terrorist guarding them raised a plasma weapon and executed them both. Commander Jinwoo watched this happen on his bridge. His jaw tightened. He turned to his weapons officer. "Fire." The asteroid base was breached in 17 locations simultaneously. Human Special Forces teams, led by soldiers trained for exactly this kind of operation, poured through the holes. They wore heavy armor and carried weapons that the terrorists had never seen before. The battle lasted 6 minutes. Every terrorist was given one chance to surrender. Every terrorist refused. They had been told that humans were weak, that humans would negotiate, that humans wouldn't dare risk galactic condemnation. They were wrong. When it was over, 27 terrorists were dead. 0 prisoners. The hostages who had been executed were recovered and brought home with full honors. The Galactic Council watched it all happen in real time. They had insisted on observing, thinking they could intervene. Now they sat in stunned silence as the human ships departed the asteroid field. Council Speaker Prax called an emergency session. Ambassador Taeyang attended, but he didn't sit in the designated human section. He walked straight to the center platform uninvited. "You all saw what happened," Taeyang said, his voice carrying through the chamber. "You saw them execute our people on camera. They did it because they thought we would negotiate. Because that's what you taught them. Kill civilians, make demands, get what you want." "Ambassador, you cannot simply ignore galactic law," a Vrin council member protested. "You cannot take justice into your own hands." "We didn't take justice into our own hands," Taeyang replied. "We delivered it with both hands. Those 17 humans who died in your station will never see another day. They'll never laugh, never cry, never hug their families. 5 of them were children. Children. And you want me to pay their murderers to stop murdering? You don't understand," Prax said, and for the first time he sounded angry. "This is how civilization works. We compromise. We find middle ground. We avoid cycles of violence." "No," Taeyang said flatly. This is how your civilization works. You created a galaxy where murdering civilians is just another negotiating tactic, where terrorists know that if they kill enough people, they'll get paid to stop. You call it compromise. We call it cowardice. The chamber erupted in shouts. Some council members demanded humanity be expelled from consideration. Some called for sanctions. Some threatened to close their borders to human ships. Ambassador Taeyang listened to it all with a calm expression. When they finally quieted down, he spoke one more time. We came here hoping to join you, to learn from you, to be part of your galactic community. But if your community's price is accepting the murder of innocents as a legitimate tool of diplomacy, then we don't want to join. We'll build our own community, with species who understand that some lines cannot be crossed. He walked out. Behind him, the council voted to suspend humanity's membership application indefinitely. Several species issued formal condemnations. They called humans barbaric, violent, and dangerous. But that night, on dozens of worlds across the galaxy, people who had lost loved ones to terrorism watched the news. They saw what humanity had done. They saw that someone finally had refused to negotiate with murderers, and they began to wonder why their own governments had never done the same. The Vexil Empire's official response came 3 days after the asteroid base was destroyed. Their high commander, a large Vexil named Kretch, appeared on every major galactic news channel. His scales were deep purple, a sign of age and status among his species. The humans have committed an act of war, Kretch declared. They slaughtered Vexil citizens without trial, without mercy, without civilization. We demand immediate reparations. We demand the humans responsible be turned over for justice. We demand compensation for the families of those killed. The speech went on for 20 minutes. Kretch talked about sovereignty, about galactic law, about the rules that civilized species followed. He never once mentioned the 17 humans his people had murdered. He never mentioned the children. Back on Earth, in the headquarters of the Unified Command, Fleet Admiral Minho watched the speech with several other senior officers. When it finished, he turned to his communications officer. "Send Commander Jinwoo to Vexil Space," Minho said, "and prepare the first fleet for deployment." "Sir, the Vexil fleet outnumbers us 3-1, one officer pointed out. "I know," Minho replied. "Send them anyway." Commander Jinwoo received his orders while his ship was still docked at Kepler Station. He read them twice, then smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. He called his bridge crew together. "We're going to Vexil Space," he announced. "We're going to give them a message. A simple one." His crew waited. "We're going to tell them they have 72 hours to hand over everyone in their government who funded the terrorists," Jinwoo continued, "or we'll consider their entire government responsible for murdering our civilians." One of his officers, a young woman named Hana, raised her hand hesitantly. "Sir, what if they refuse?" "Then we go in and get them ourselves," Jinwoo said simply. Indomitable departed Kepler Station with 4 other warships. Captain Yuna's Dawn's Promise stayed behind, but only because it was a diplomatic vessel, not a combat ship. Yuna didn't like being left behind, but she understood orders. What she did next, though, wasn't exactly following orders. She contacted Security Chief Jisoo. "How deep can you dig into Vexil financial records?" Jisoo raised an eyebrow. "Captain, that would be illegal under galactic information laws." "I didn't ask if it was legal," Yuna replied. "I asked if you could do it," Jisoo grinned. "Give me 6 hours." She didn't need 6 hours. She needed 4. What she found made her stop and stare at her screen for a full minute before calling Yuna back. "Captain, you need to see this," Jisoo said. Her voice was tight. "You need to see this right now." In Yuna's office, Jisoo spread the data across 3 screens. Bank transfers, communication logs, weapons shipments, supply routes. All of it carefully hidden, all of it now exposed. "The Vexil government has been funding terrorist groups for over a century," Jisoo explained. "Not just the ones that attacked us. Dozens of groups across dozens of species. Whenever they wanted to pressure another species, they'd fund terrorists to attack them. Then they'd offer to mediate the situation in exchange for trade concessions or territory." Yuna felt sick. "How many attacks?" "Hundreds. Maybe thousands." Jisoo pulled up a list. "Remember the Corthan embassy bombing 5 years ago? Vexil funded it. The Pelix transport ship that disappeared? Vexil pirates paid by Vexil government. The Vryn colony that was raided? Same thing. Why didn't anyone notice?" "They did," Jisoo said bitterly. But they negotiated instead of investigating. They paid the terrorists to stop, never asking where the terrorists got their funding. The Vexil government made billions while pretending to be neutral mediators. Yuna stared at the screens for a long moment. Then she made a decision that would change the galaxy. She opened a channel to Ambassador Taeyang. Ambassador, I need authorization to broadcast classified intelligence on all public galactic channels. What intelligence? Taeyang asked. Yuna told him. There was a long silence. Do it, Taeyang said finally. Broadcast everything. Let the galaxy see who they've been negotiating with. The broadcast went out 1 hour before Commander Jinwoo reached Vexil space. It didn't go to governments or militaries. It went straight to public news networks, to social media, to every communication channel that ordinary citizens used. The evidence was overwhelming. Every terrorist attack, every demand, every payment, all traced back to the Vexil government. Species that thought they had been victims of random violence now saw the truth. They saw that their loved ones had died not because of ideology or grievance, but because the Vexil Empire wanted something and was willing to murder to get it. On the Korthan homeworld, protests began within hours. Citizens marched through the streets demanding answers from their government. Why had they negotiated? Why had they paid? Why had they never investigated? On Pelix Prime, the families of transport ship crew members who had disappeared gathered outside the council embassy. They carried signs with the names of their dead. On Vryn Major, the military announced it would no longer follow the council's negotiation policies. If terrorists attacked their people, they would respond the way humans had responded. By the time Commander Jinwoo's ship reached Vexil space, the galaxy was burning with anger. High Commander Kretch watched the protests on his screens and felt fear for the first time in his long life. His people were calling him a murderer. His allies on the council were backing away, unwilling to be associated with him. His own military commanders were asking uncomfortable questions. When Jinwoo's message arrived, Kretch almost didn't read it. He knew what it would say. High Commander Kretch, this is Commander Jinwoo of Earth Forces. You have 72 hours to surrender yourself and every government official involved in funding terrorism. Hand them over for trial, or we will consider your entire government complicit in the murder of our civilians and the civilians of dozens of other species. This is not a negotiation. This is justice. Kretch made his biggest mistake then. He decided to call the human bluff. He sent a response full of threats. He talked about his superior fleet. He talked about his allies. He talked about how the Vexil Empire had never lost a war because they had never needed to fight one. Everyone always negotiated. He forgot that humans were different. The 72 hours passed. The Vexil government did not surrender. They didn't even respond to the second message Jinwoo sent. They thought silence was a negotiating tactic, a way to show strength. They were wrong. Back on Earth, Fleet Admiral Minho stood in the command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing the entire situation, every ship, every planet, every political development. Beside him stood Ambassador Taeyang, who had returned from Kepler Station for this moment. Admiral, one officer reported, the deadline has passed. The Vexil government has not responded. Minho looked at Taeyang. Ambassador, this is your last chance to recommend negotiation. Taeyang thought about the 17 dead humans. He thought about the 5 children. He thought about the hundreds or thousands of other civilians across the galaxy who had died because their governments chose to pay murderers instead of stopping them. No negotiation, Admiral, Taeyang said. Bring them to justice. Minho nodded. He turned to his communications officer. Send the signal. First Fleet is authorized to engage. Across human space, 70 warships began moving toward Vexil territory. It was the largest military operation humanity had ever launched. Every ship was ready. Every crew was prepared. Every captain knew exactly what they were fighting for. Commander Jinwoo received the authorization and felt a grim satisfaction. He opened a channel to his fleet. All ships, this is Jinwoo. We go in hard, we go in fast, and we go in clean. Our targets are military installations and government facilities that funded terrorism. We do not harm civilians. We do not destroy civilian infrastructure. We are not conquerors. We are not murderers. We are delivering justice. Move out! The Vexil military scrambled to respond. They had 3 times as many ships as the humans. They had superior numbers. They had defended their space for centuries, but they had never fought an enemy that refused to stop when the other side asked for Negotiations. The first battle happened near a Vexil military station that had coordinated terrorist supply shipments. The Vexil commander expected the humans to make demands, to threaten, to posture. Instead, the human ship simply attacked. The battle lasted 18 minutes. The station was disabled, its data cores seized, its commanders arrested. The human fleet moved on to the next target before the Vexil High Command even understood what was happening. And in living rooms across the galaxy, billions of people watched the news. They watched humans do what their own governments had never done. They watched justice, swift and sure, being delivered to those who had murdered innocents. The galaxy was changing, and it was changing fast. The Vexil military outnumbered the human fleet 3-1, but numbers didn't tell the whole story. The Vexil had fought many conflicts, but they had never actually finished one. Every war in their history had ended with negotiation, usually when the other side realized that fighting was more expensive than compromising. They had strategies for making enemies negotiate, not for making enemies surrender. Humans had strategies for both. Commander Jinwoo stood on the bridge of Indomitable, watching the tactical display. 6 Vexil cruisers were moving to intercept his battle group. The Vexil commander was already broadcasting on open channels, demanding to speak with human leadership. They want to negotiate. Lieutenant Hana reported from the communications station. Ignore it, Jinwoo said calmly. Target their weapon systems. Disable, don't destroy. We want prisoners, not corpses. The Vexil cruisers opened fire first. Their plasma weapons were powerful, designed to overwhelm shields and force enemies to withdraw. The human ships took the hits, shields flaring bright, but they didn't retreat. They simply returned fire with precision that shocked the Vexil commanders. Human railguns punched through Vexil armor at specific points, disabling weapons without destroying ships. Human missiles targeted engine systems, leaving vessels drifting but intact. Within 10 minutes, all 6 cruisers were crippled and their crews were broadcasting surrender signals. Secure the ships, Jinwoo ordered. Take the commanders into custody. We need them for testimony. While Jinwoo's group handled the military response, Security Chief Jisoo led a different kind of mission. She had joined the fleet with a team of intelligence specialists. Their job wasn't to fight. Their job was to find proof. Her team landed on a Vexil moon where the government kept its intelligence archives. The facility was supposed to be secret, but Jisoo had found it in the data she had stolen. She and 30 Special Forces soldiers breached the facility in the middle of the local night. The guards surrendered quickly. They were intelligence officers, not soldiers, and they had no training for combat with humans who moved like ghosts and shot with impossible accuracy. Within an hour, Jisoo was standing in the archive vault looking at thousands of data storage units. Copy everything, she ordered. Every file, every message, every record. I want proof of every terrorist attack they've funded for the past century. Her team worked for 6 hours straight. When they left, they carried enough evidence to convict every member of the Vexil High Command 10 times over. Back in Council space, the Galactic Council was in chaos. Council Speaker Prax called emergency session after emergency session, trying to get the humans to stop. He sent messages to Ambassador Taiyang, who was still on Earth. He sent messages to Fleet Admiral Minho. He even tried to contact Commander Jinwoo directly. Nobody responded. They're ignoring galactic law. A Pelix Council member complained. They're acting like barbarians. They're acting like people who watched their children get murdered, a Vryn delegate said quietly. She was new to the council, elected after the previous delegate had resigned in shame when her government's negotiation policies were exposed. Maybe we're the barbarians for pretending murder is just politics. The council chamber fell silent. Nobody wanted to address that question. On the 4th day of the operation, the Vexil military tried a desperate tactic. They gathered their remaining fleet, nearly 200 ships, and prepared for a massive counterattack. The plan was simple. Overwhelm the human fleet with numbers, force them to retreat, then negotiate from a position of strength. Fleet Admiral Minho watched the Vexil fleet massing on his displays. He was aboard his flagship Resolute, which had just arrived in Vexil space with the main battle group. Around him, his staff waited for orders. They think they can scare us into retreating, Minho said. They're wrong. All ships prepare for engagement. Show them what human tactics really mean. The battle that followed became known as the Vexil Stand. The Vexil fleet attacked in waves, trying to overwhelm human defenses. Their commanders used the same strategies that had worked for Centuries, mass assaults, overwhelming firepower, dramatic displays meant to intimidate. The human fleet responded with coordinated precision. Ships moved in perfect formation, covering each other's weaknesses. They targeted enemy command vessels first, disrupting vexel coordination. They used electronic warfare to jam enemy communications. They exploited every gap in the vexel formations. Most importantly, they never stopped moving forward. The vexel fleet broke after 8 hours of combat. Not because they were defeated, but because they were confused. Every time they tried to negotiate a ceasefire, the humans ignored them. Every time they tried to withdraw to regroup, the humans pressed the attack. The vexel military had no experience with an enemy that wouldn't stop until the job was done. 70 vexel ships were disabled. 30 more surrendered. The rest scattered, their commanders fleeing to safe ports. Commander Jinwoo pursued them. His ships arrived at the Vexel High Command Station 3 hours later. The station was heavily defended, ringed with weapons platforms and shield generators. But Jinwoo had something the Vexel didn't expect. He had Captain Yuna. Yuna had arrived from Kepler Station with 3 of her best pilots. They flew small, fast ships that could slip through the defensive perimeter. While the Vexel defenders focused on Jinwoo's warships, Yuna's team planted charges on the shield generators. When the shields fell, Jinwoo's forces breached the station in 12 places simultaneously. Jisoo led the boarding teams personally. They moved through the corridors like trained hunters, stunning guards and securing facilities. In the command center, they found High Commander Kretsch. He was surrounded by his senior officers, all of them arguing about what to do. Some wanted to fight. Some wanted to flee, some wanted to negotiate. Jisoo didn't give them time to decide. Her team burst into the command center with weapons ready. The Vexel officers froze. High Commander Kretsch, Jisoo said formally, "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit mass murder, for funding terrorism, and for crimes against sapient life across multiple species. You will be taken into custody for trial." Kretsch stared at her. "You can't do this. The council will stop you. Galactic law protects government officials from—" "Galactic law also says you shouldn't murder children," Jisoo interrupted. "We're done listening to your laws. You're coming with us." The arrest of High Commander Kretsch was broadcast live across the galaxy. Within hours, 6 other senior Vexel officials surrendered to human forces. They had watched what happened to Kretsch and decided that surrender was better than being hunted down. But something else was happening on the Vexil homeworld. Something the humans hadn't planned for. The Vexil people themselves were rising up. For generations, the Vexil government had told its citizens that terrorism was a necessary tool of statecraft. That murder was just politics by other means. That their empire was strong because it was willing to do what others wouldn't. Now those citizens saw the evidence that Jisoo had recovered. They saw the names of the dead. Hundreds of species. Thousands of civilians. All killed so the Vexil Empire could gain trade routes or territory or political advantages. The protests started in the capital city and spread within hours. Vexil citizens marched through the streets demanding the resignation of their government. The military, seeing the evidence themselves, refused to fire on the protesters. Many soldiers joined them instead. On the 8th day of the human operation, the Vexil Provisional Government contacted Fleet Admiral Minho. They were representatives of the protesters, hastily elected to speak for the people. Admiral Minho, their spokesperson, said, "We surrender, unconditionally. We will hand over every government official involved in terrorism. We will cooperate fully with investigations. We will make restitution to every species harmed by our actions. Please, no more fighting." Minho considered this carefully. Then he responded, "We accept your surrender. Prepare a list of all officials involved. We will send legal teams to process them fairly. But understand this, fair doesn't mean gentle. Everyone responsible will face trial. Everyone guilty will face justice." The provisional government agreed immediately. Within days, human military tribunals were processing Vexil government officials. The trials were swift but thorough. Evidence was presented. Defendants could speak in their own defense. Lawyers argued both sides. The verdicts shocked the galaxy with their fairness. Some officials were acquitted when evidence showed they hadn't known about the terrorism funding. Some received lighter sentences when they cooperated with investigations. But those who had ordered the deaths of civilians, those who had funded the terrorists, Those who had treated murder as just another political tool, they faced the full weight of justice. High Commander Kretsch was found guilty of conspiracy to commit mass murder across 47 species. His sentence was life imprisonment. No death penalty because humans didn't believe in killing even the worst criminals, but no mercy either because justice demanded consequences, and in the data Jisoo had recovered she found something else, something that would shake the Galactic Council to its core. She brought it to Ambassador Taeyang, who had returned to Kepler Station. "Ambassador," she said quietly, "the Vexil Empire wasn't the only government funding terrorists. There are 11 others." Taeyang looked at the list of governments. He recognized several of them. They were council members, species that had lectured humanity about civilization and compromise. "Publish it," he said, "all of it. Let every citizen in the galaxy see what their governments have been doing." Jisoo hesitated. "Sir, this will cause chaos. Governments will fall. The council might collapse." "Good," Taeyang replied. "If their civilization is built on murdering innocents, then it deserves to fall. Publish everything." The data release happened at midnight Galactic Standard Time. Security Chief Jisoo had prepared everything carefully. The evidence went to every news network, every social media platform, every public information channel in the galaxy. There was no way to hide it, no way to suppress it, no way to spin it. 12 governments, including 6 members of the Galactic Council, had been funding terrorist operations for decades. Some did it for territory. Some did it for trade advantages. Some did it simply because it was cheaper than actual warfare. All of them had treated the murder of civilians as just another tool in their political arsenal. The galaxy erupted. On Corthan Prime, the government fell within 18 hours. Citizens stormed government buildings demanding answers. The military, disgusted by what they learned, refused to protect politicians who had sent terrorists to kill their own people's allies. The Prime Minister resigned and 3 of her top officials were arrested by their own police. On 6 other worlds, similar scenes played out. Governments collapsed. Officials fled or were arrested. Citizens who had believed their leaders were civilized discovered they had been living under regimes that thought murder was acceptable if it served their interests. The Galactic Council tried to hold emergency sessions, but half their members were too busy dealing with revolts at home. Council Speaker Prax called for calm, for patience, for understanding. Nobody was listening anymore. Ambassador Taeyang watched the chaos from Kepler Station. Part of him felt satisfaction. These governments had lectured humanity about civilization while secretly funding mass murder. They deserved to fall. But another part of him felt something else. Responsibility. He opened a channel to Fleet Admiral Minho. "Admiral, we broke it. Now we need to fix it. What do you have in mind, Ambassador?" "A new alliance," Taeyang said. "Species that are tired of living under the threat of terrorism. Species that want to protect their civilians instead of paying murderers. We build something better than the Council ever was." 2 weeks later, representatives from 18 species gathered at Kepler Station. They came from governments that had survived the revelations, species whose leaders had genuinely not known about the terrorism funding. They came because they had seen what humanity did, and they wanted to be part of it. Captain Yuna helped coordinate the security for the gathering. She walked through the same plaza where the terrorist attack had happened, the place where 17 humans and 43 aliens had died. A memorial stood there now, simple but powerful. Just names carved in stone, no speeches, no politics, just remembrance. The conference began with a moment of silence for all victims of terrorism across the galaxy. Then Ambassador Taeyang stood to speak. "We didn't come to your stars to conquer you," he said. "We didn't come to change you. We came hoping to learn from you, to join you, to be part of something greater than ourselves. But what we found was a system built on a terrible compromise. Your governments decided that some deaths were acceptable if they kept the peace. They decided that murdering civilians was just another form of diplomacy." He paused, looking at each delegate in turn. "We refuse to accept that. Not because we're better than you, not because we're more civilized, but because we've learned something in our own violent history. We've learned that when you compromise with murderers, you just get more murder. When you pay terrorists to stop, you just teach them that terror works. The only way to end it is to stop accepting it." A Vryn delegate raised her hand. Her name was Kessa, and she had lost family in one of the terrorist attacks that the Vexel had funded. "Ambassador Taeyang," she said, "my government wants to join you, but we're afraid. The council has resources, connections, trade networks. If we leave, we might suffer." "You'll suffer more if you stay," Taeyang replied. "The council is dying. It's dying because it was built on a lie. It told everyone that compromise and negotiation could solve any problem. But it couldn't solve terrorism, because the terrorists knew they'd always get paid. Now everyone knows that. The council has no moral authority left. So what do we do?" Another delegate asked. This one was Pelix, his body rippling with uncertainty. "We build something new," Taeyang said. "We create an alliance based on one simple rule. We protect innocent lives. No negotiating with terrorists. No paying murderers to stop murdering. No treating the deaths of civilians as acceptable losses. If someone attacks civilians, we respond with justice, not diplomacy." Over the next 3 days, they hammered out the details. The alliance would be called the Free Systems Alliance. Any species could join, but they had to agree to the core principles. Protect civilians. Never negotiate with terrorists. Hold murderers accountable. 23 species signed the founding charter. More sent messages saying they wanted to join, but needed time to restructure their governments first. The Galactic Council issued a statement condemning the new alliance. They called it destabilizing. They called it dangerous. They predicted it would lead to endless wars. They were wrong. Something interesting happened in the months after the Free Systems Alliance formed. Terrorist attacks in alliance space dropped by 89%. The reason was simple. Terrorists had no leverage anymore. They couldn't threaten civilians to force governments to negotiate because alliance governments wouldn't negotiate. They couldn't demand payments because alliance governments would hunt them down instead. The few terrorist groups that tried to attack alliance worlds learned quickly what happened. Human-trained security forces, using tactics that Jisoo had taught them, tracked them down within days. They were arrested, tried fairly, and imprisoned. No dramatic speeches, no political theater, just justice, swift and certain. Meanwhile, in council space, terrorist attacks actually increased. Criminal groups saw the chaos and took advantage. They made demands, knowing that council governments would still try to negotiate, but now those governments had no money to pay them. The revelations about terrorism funding had destroyed their budgets, and their citizens refused to let them use public funds to pay murderers. The council was trapped in a system of their own making, and they couldn't escape it. 6 months after the Vexel War, as it came to be called, the Galactic Council formally dissolved. There was no dramatic announcement, no final speech. They just stopped meeting. Member species quietly withdrew, some joining the Free Systems Alliance, others forming smaller regional pacts. Council Speaker Prax retired to his homeworld. Before he left, he met with Ambassador Taeyang one last time. "You destroyed something that had existed for 1,000 years," Prax said. There was no anger in his voice, just sadness. "No," Taeyang replied gently. "You destroyed it when you decided that murdering civilians was an acceptable tool of statecraft. We just made sure everyone knew about it. What happens now? Now we build something better. Something that actually protects people instead of pretending to." Prax nodded slowly. "Perhaps you're right. Perhaps we lost our way somewhere. But Ambassador, I hope you understand the weight of what you've taken on. Building a civilization is harder than destroying one." "We know," Taeyang said. "That's why we're not doing it alone." The Free Systems Alliance grew quickly. Within a year, it had 50 member species. Within 2 years, over 100. Species joined because they were tired of living in fear. They joined because they wanted to protect their children. They joined because they had finally seen what real justice looked like. Captain Yuna was promoted to Admiral and given command of the Alliance training fleet. Her job was to teach other species how to protect themselves using human tactics. Not how to conquer, not how to dominate, but how to defend civilians and stop terrorists before they could kill. Commander Jinwoo became the Alliance's first military coordinator. He didn't command other species' forces. He advised them, helped them develop their own strategies, and made sure everyone understood the core principle. The goal wasn't to win wars. It was to prevent them by making sure that violence against civilians never paid off. Security Chief Jisoo ran the Alliance Intelligence Service. She trained analysts from dozens of species, teaching them how to track terrorist networks, how to follow money trails, and how to gather evidence that would stand up in court. Because the Alliance believed in trials, in evidence, in justice rather than revenge. Lieutenant Hana, who had served on Jinwoo's bridge during the Vexil War, became a liaison officer. She traveled between Alliance worlds, helping new members understand human culture and helping humans understand alien perspectives. She discovered she had a talent for building bridges between species, and Ambassador Taiyang became the first Secretary General of the Free Systems Alliance. He didn't want the job at first. He argued that an alien should lead the Alliance to prove it wasn't just a human empire, but the other species insisted. They wanted someone who understood what it meant to refuse compromise with murderers. On the one-year anniversary of the Kepler Station attack, a ceremony was held at the memorial. Thousands attended, representing over 100 species. They came to remember the 17 humans and 43 aliens who had died that day. But they also came to celebrate what their deaths had created. Admiral Yuna stood at the memorial, looking at the names carved in stone. She thought about the children who had died, about the families destroyed, about the moment when everything changed. Ambassador Taiyang stood beside her. "Do you think it was worth it?" he asked quietly. "All the chaos, all the governments that fell, all the upheaval?" Yuna thought about that. She thought about the reports coming in from Alliance space, showing terrorist attacks dropping to almost nothing. She thought about the children on Alliance worlds who could play without fear. She thought about the families who no longer had to worry about their loved ones being murdered for political leverage. "Yes," she said finally. "Those 17 people, those 5 children, they died because someone thought murdering innocents was acceptable. Now the galaxy knows it isn't. Their deaths meant something. They changed everything." In the plaza behind them, children from a dozen species played together. They laughed and ran, unaware of the memorial, unaware of the history. They just knew they were safe. That was what victory looked like. Not conquered enemies or defeated fleets, just children playing without fear. Ambassador Taiyang gave a speech that day. It was short because he didn't believe in long speeches. He stood at the memorial and spoke to the gathered crowd. "We didn't come to your stars to teach you how to be human," he said. "We came to remind you of something every species already knew. Something you had forgotten or chosen to ignore. Murder is wrong. Killing innocents is wrong. And compromising with those who do it is wrong." He paused, looking at the memorial. These people died because others thought their lives were acceptable losses. Now, because of their sacrifice, the galaxy finally understands that no life is an acceptable loss. That every innocent matters. That justice isn't about revenge or conquest. It's about making sure that those who harmed the innocent face consequences, and that those consequences are certain enough to make others think twice. He turned back to the crowd. "The Free Systems Alliance isn't perfect. We'll make mistakes. We'll struggle with hard decisions. But we'll do it based on one simple truth. Innocent lives matter more than politics, more than trade, more than convenience. And anyone who threatens those lives will face justice. Not negotiation. Not compromise, justice." The crowd was silent for a moment. Then someone started clapping. Others joined in. Soon the entire plaza was filled with applause from 100 species, all united by a simple belief that humans had reminded them of. Murder is wrong, and the galaxy would never again pretend otherwise.